Good afternoon. Welcome to this special edition of the Public Works Podcast. We are recording in South Florida in Delray Beach. We've got a great panel for you today. We're doing something a little bit different to get some expertise on what's happening across the country in the transportation space. Appreciate you all being here today. If you have a second, go ahead and hit like for this episode. I know you haven't heard it yet, but it's going to be good. Share it with a friend. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check us out on LinkedIn. All that good stuff. I'm your host for today's episode, Shane Silsby. And I'd like to introduce our great panel, or have them introduce themselves, and maybe starting with Christine.
Christine Fanchi. I'm a Vice President at WSP USA in Transportation Planning in South Florida.
And I'm Chris Evers with Pavement Technology Inc., and I wear a couple hats. I'm also the Executive Coordinator for the Florida Pavement Preservation Council.
Okay, great. We appreciate them being here today, some of it on short notice. I demanded they be here. They got in here. They did it. And one of the things I wanted to talk about briefly was appreciation for associations and the value of industry associations, or sometimes trade associations. And I'm an active member of American Public Works Association, American Society of Civil Engineers, and other organizations. But these folks also have been throughout their careers in those associations. And so maybe, Chris, we could start with you on your efforts, your branding today. I love it. Tell us about your thoughts on associations.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a big fan of associations. Obviously, I've got my colors on here for APWA. I'm the past president of the Florida chapter here in APWA, and that was back in 2012, so it's been a few days, but certainly enjoyed my time. And then very active, as I said, in the Florida Pavement Preservation Council world. We're associated with the National Center for Pavement Preservation, and that's a good tie-in for Pavement Technology Inc., which is my paying job. I have really grown up the last 30 years in this industry has been all about associations. I've spent a lot of time working within them, and I'm just a huge fan of the collaboration that occurs. That's how you and I met, and it just is invaluable. That collaboration is what I think gets things done, the networking, the exchange of ideas. Even what we're going to be doing in Houston coming up at PWX is absolutely critical. So it's what I really spend a lot of my time doing. It's what I probably enjoy the most.
Well, that's great. And thanks for the plug, Chris. So the American Public Works Association, PWX, annual conference is in Houston at the end of August into the first week of September. Public Works professionals from all across the country will be there. We hope to see you all there as well. Before we leave you, Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about your efforts with the Public Works Directors Roundtable that you usually do at the conferences? And
right on time. Absolutely. Yes. The Public Works Director Roundtable is one of the initiatives that began back in 2012, and it started in Florida. And then in 2014, it went kind of nationwide to PWX. And so it's really an opportunity at PWX for directors from across the country and even internationally to sit at a round table, obviously, like the name implies, and have that free exchange of information. We come up with topics, the topic du jour, and we're typically highlighting some of the things that they face, that directors face specifically in their roles as directors. And it's really an opportunity for them to exchange maybe some of the things that have worked for them, some of the things that haven't worked for them, unique challenges. And then we take each of those roundtables and provide feedback to the entire group. And so we'll have hundreds of directors in one room really there to banter about. As public works directors are typically not shy. They get right in there and start talking immediately about what is affecting them. I think what's most enjoyable to see is that you'll have two completely different types of communities. You might have a very small rural community sitting next to, and this happened a couple of years ago, sitting next to the public works director from Dallas, Texas. And so you've got a huge organization, and then an organization that may have less than 20 employees. Even though that's the case, they share kind of this like-minded love of public works, and you get to see that interaction, and you get to see that exchange of information. It's definitely one of the things that we really enjoy putting on every year.
That's great. I want to ask you, Christine, to think about over your career, associations you might have worked with or thought were interesting, and any experience there you want to share?
I moved from Florida to Arizona out of school, and so I was encouraged by my first company actually to get involved with associations. And it really helped because I was able to not only have coworkers that became friends and family, but then the association became like a broader community for me. I was really involved in ASCE in my early career, and that gave me the opportunity to really network. And I actually got a job with a great company because of that network. They trusted people that were young leaders in those associations. So that gave me opportunities through that. Got to go work with you at the City of Phoenix.
Oh, yeah.
Because of that job, and be introduced to NACTO. Because of that passion, I got to the City of Fort Lauderdale, which now I'm in South Florida doing NACTO-inspired designs. Really, that network of one thing led to another, which led to another opportunity. So I really see the benefit of those associations really helping me personally grow, but giving opportunities to grow. The other thing is I did a lot of conference work when I was in Arizona. So I put on the statewide conference for ASCE for 5 years. And then NACTO, of course, hosted a national conference. And then that work leveraged into when I came to the city of Fort Lauderdale, they put on an annual transportation summit. So I was able to help bring education not only to my field in Arizona, but then when I moved here back to Florida, I got to educate young minds here towards what's happening regionally and nationally for best practices. So really enjoyed that opportunity.
That's great. Can I ask you to go a little deeper on NACTO? You know, what is the acronym? What do they focus on? And how important that can be in the transportation industry as we look at the difference between urban and rural areas?
Of course. So NACTO is National Association of City Transportation Officials. It was started during the Bloomberg administration in New York because City Bike had come into New York, had offered all these free bikes, but they needed the infrastructure. The mayor put together a task force and started pulling parking off the curb and creating parking protected, putting in green bike lanes, doing the Times Square pilot project. And these things weren't per FHWA or the Green Book. And so the mayor pulled together an organization, NACTO, and pulled in the 10 largest cities across the U.S. Of course, City of Phoenix was one of those, and that's where we were able to work together. And so basically, that organization created a new book for design of how to design cities for people in urban environments. You know, all these big cities, people are moving back to the city. They need to be able to move safely, efficiently, and have choices. And NACTO created the Urban Street Design Guide. It was published in 2013. And then basically a lot of cities were given opportunities to use the new book to create places for people, and that spread. And the reason I went to Fort Lauderdale actually was because they were a NACTO city.
Oh, interesting.
One of the first ones in Florida. And so that gave me the opportunity to use that new NACTO knowledge that I had to bring it back to my home state of Florida and really start doing more progressive complete streets projects to move people safely.
Great. And this shows you the importance of an association, organization, whatever you want to call it, that really took on a specific issue, urban street design, and gave new guidelines or standards for people to follow, to have comfortable ways in doing that.
Right.
For the different associations also, you can have different targets for the people who are working in them. So NACTO, very specific to cities, especially larger cities, to really understand how to balance mobility. APWA, I think, Chris, is in the name public works, so you get the whole spectrum, but that's where your public agency officials are likely to go. ASCE, more civil engineering, more engineering focused private sector potentially for those associations, depending on the people you're trying to work with. And then there's another one that comes up called ACEC, Council of Engineering Companies, and if you're trying to advocate for something in that industry, a lot of times private sector, that could be a place to go. So there's kind of an industry that can help you address specific issues and work with a group of people maybe that are trying to address the same thing.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, for APWA, we mentioned the conference coming up. I'm helping at the national level with the Government Affairs Committee, so that's another benefit of these associations is advocating at the federal level and sometimes the state level, but at the federal level, we're talking about the new surface transportation bill, and we might chat about that a little bit going forward. Next, I wanted to talk about sustainability and resilience in the transportation industry. And you all have different approaches and focus areas of the transportation system. But maybe starting with you, Chris, if you just want to chat a little bit more about the impact that you're trying to make from a sustainability and ultimate resilience standpoints on the pavement side, and any maybe regional areas of focus or any recent wins,
Sure.
anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, PTI started back in 1972 and was really the genesis of really what came out of the energy crisis back in the 1970s. It used to be that there was no such thing as pavement preservation. You just would remove the asphalt and start again because asphalt was cheap. Asphalt is typically the bottom of the barrel. So there wasn't any concern about preserving anything. It was just rip it up and do it again. So as prices went up and the story kind of remains the same, there was a need for preserving these pavements, which is sustainable in itself. And so I think we've been in sustainability the entire time, but it's taken on kind of new meaning with associating green with sustainable, which is proper. That's the right look. There was never a concern about carbon avoidance or low embodied carbon or carbon negative or carbon neutral. Those weren't talked about. It was just preserving an asset, which is typically the right way to be a good steward of the taxpayers' money. And now it's taken on a different life, which is good, and we're embracing that. So I think what we've done is take that foundational pavement preservation and create something that really embodies more of a green side to it. So that would be everything from reducing and capturing vehicular emissions, mitigating the urban heat island effect, which is what kind of led me to California and Arizona and some of these places, Texas, that have a lot of issues with urban heat, even to the point of the technology we're using, which is photocatalytic, the word of the day. But that technology even enables the pavement to help decompose microplastic particles from tire and brake wear. And so even as we transition to electrification and EVs, they have a problem with obviously tire wear. They're heavier, and so they go through tires faster. And so we're getting ahead of some of these challenges, even as we move out of traditional ICE vehicles. Harnessing
ICE, Chris?
ICE, yes, I know. So a different ICE, but this one would be internal combustion engine.
Internal combustion engine.
Thank you, yes. We'll assume that the engineers were on top of that, but it's good to be sure. So the fact is that if we can take the premise of preserving our pavements, which is already carbon avoidance and a low carbon strategy, making that asset last longer, but then brings something that really turns the pavement into carbon negative, whether we're accounting for carbon in CO2 equivalent or just the CO2 itself, then that's a real positive because many of the agencies have carbon neutral goals. Many of them in like California, where you're at, are very aggressive. We have to take something and use this technology, use any technology if it works, to go at it in a way that's going to produce results. And just waiting on the electrification efforts ignores the fact that we're still have hundreds of millions of internal combustion engines driving around. So that's the way that Pavement Technology is attempting to tackle the issue and bring that to cities, counties, and DOTs across both the United States and internationally.
From an asset management standpoint, the hope is you can have a good, productive program, help with your pavement condition index, extend potentially the life of your asphalts. But then also, if you add another layer of the benefits, you're saying, well, now you can have a sustainable, maybe carbon reduction element to your system where we have the biggest emitters, right? Transportation is the largest emitter.
Yes, that mobile source air pollution, which has been very difficult to capture. If you look at even the power industry, they have got solar and nuclear, which is helping move away from coal, which is more of a dirty technology. So if you look at what this enables is where the pavement, which is the source of these use phase sins, I would say, we're only a few feet from the tailpipe, and that's where all the material is coming from. If we can be part of the solution and attack the problem that's that close, it's like going after millions and millions of little smokestacks. So it's a very effective and elegant way to do it, and using the hopefully perpetual power of the sun to decarbonize the transportation sector would be a very elegant solution.
Yeah, good background. Christine, I wanted to move to you. We're talking about the materials that the vehicles are driving on and that surface, but I wanted to ask you about the things driving on that surface, the cars, the bikes, or the people walking next to it. Do you have thoughts about how that can be laid out in a more sustainable approach, maybe reduce emissions, maybe help with other options? Your thoughts on sustainability?
Moving towards multimodal, people are moving to cities, right? Our cities are densifying. How do we move people more efficiently? Because we can't widen the roads anymore. We're built out, can't take homes or right away. So really, how do we move people more efficiently? And how do we reorganize the existing right-of-ways or spaces that we have? And not only doing the products to capture those emissions, but how can we even maybe narrow the asphalt so we have less heat in general, but then obviously coat it with some cool stuff? How can we add trees to shade, right? So people want to walk and maybe that also intensifies the heat reduction with the shade. But it's really about making space for those options is really the key. Having the tools to have flexibility in the design to make sure that you're meeting the needs. Is there a transit opportunity nearby? Making space for that transit shelter, making sure there's shade for people waiting. Or if there's rain, we're in South Florida, so if there's rain, there's a shelter. Making sure that if there's bikes, the pavement is consistent, there's not a gap, things like that. It's really about balancing all those things, but I can see where the technology that Chris is speaking to could really complement what the design itself so that we can get to the zero emissions goal faster, hopefully.
Yeah, good points. We're in the transportation industry, but we don't control how the automobiles are constructed or made. So we're dealt with, okay, what are they driving on and what is the space that they're utilizing? And I think good points in wrapping back into the city development, Christine, is that you're not going to be able to widen in most cases. You might have historic buildings or high rises or whatever the case might be in some cities, or neighborhoods that don't want to give up more land. And so how do you reuse that? And when you reuse it, offering those options, as soon as you give somebody an option to not use their vehicle, they can at least make that choice. Right. Otherwise, they have no choice. They're going to be in their vehicle. And at that point, you've lost some of the battle. So all good points there on sustainability. To do any of these elements or projects or initiatives, there needs to be money. Okay, it needs some funding. That's one of the things I try to help cities and counties with, is identifying that at the federal level. But as Chris and I know, and trying to work on some of the programs under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, pavements necessarily not getting prioritized for some funding at the federal level. Construction projects, maybe yes, but dealing with the elements that make the pavements more sustainable, not necessarily. But yet, on the mobility side, we're hopeful heading into the future, but you need to identify those funds and help your clients with that. So, Chris, what are your thoughts about what's available maybe to folks, cities, counties, whatever in the industry to take a look at, either at the federal, state, or regional levels?
Well, you and I both remember even just a couple years ago where there was funding available and then the funding will disappear. There's a normal cycle of things in Washington, D.C., and so these things happen and you have to be prepared for them. And I still have never met a public works director that said, oh, we're good. We're totally fine on money. Yeah. So if you're out there, call me. But it just doesn't happen. And what places like California are doing with their extreme heat funding grants opportunity that is ongoing right now. Actually, I have to rush back and work on some of that for some of the deadlines upcoming. Helping communities like you're doing is very important because a lot of times they're busy just running the city or county. And so they don't have time necessarily to fully understand all of the funding mechanisms, and some of the grants can be quite complicated. I think it's important for them to have experts that they can count on, that they can call, where they can bring in the experts on the funding. That's certainly not me. I try to help where I can, but it's really important to have that at your fingertips to be able to dial for dollars, as they say. And what I think is more important is that we have to look outside of government. I think what we see in the future is the ability to bring other monetization strategies. There's no reason that we can't have more private sector engagement. We're working with a company, a large multinational company, ASCE in Colorado. They basically own Northwest Parkway in Denver for 100 years. Their lease has 83 years left, so still a lot of time left. And so their concerns are the same as our ability to meet those challenges, preserve the pavement so that it lasts longer, but also bring some sustainability to that for their clients. Denver has some air quality issues, as we all know. That funding mechanism, that was a way for them to have access to a roadway without tapping government dollars. And so those, as they call them, P3, public-private partnerships, are playing more of a role, especially in areas where there are gaps. And there's gaps in some of these transportation, I would say, critical infrastructure pieces that really just are not going to get met with just gas tax dollars. So it's important for us to recognize that and even bring in other money as it becomes available. If we can get to a point where we can have some of these large tech companies that have big impacts on our infrastructure foot part of that bill, I see that as the future as well.
Yeah, we all know, and we've talked about on this show, other episodes, that the federal gas tax hasn't been adjusted since 1993. All other costs in your lives have gone up in the last 30 years, but the gas tax revenue source has not. So that's what makes some of these initiatives like P3s and potentially grant funds so important. And I wanted to ask you, Christine, on the mobility side, operations side, your thoughts about some funding elements that might be accessible for the everyday agency, either federal, state, or regional sources.
Well, right now the exciting part is the Safe Streets for All grant that are available to all agencies, except for the states, right? So counties, cities, tribal. And I've actually just wrote a grant last month in May for the city of Fort Lauderdale for an implementation grant because we just finished an SS for a regional plan. So those grants are still in the works this year as well. And cities are able to use that really for safety, using the data from the safety action plan to tell the story, to implement more safety countermeasures to serve all people moving. Other opportunities with cities have been, they usually have traffic calming programs within their cities that have led to safer streets. And so even though those buckets of money are maybe a little limited, people have been able to get creative to use it for multimodal as well. The other one is Safe Routes to School. It's funded by the state of Florida here, and they give out grants annually, and people have also gotten creative with doing more than just sidewalks, crosswalks, speed management, things like that. So using different buckets, of course. In Broward, we were really good at cities working together. If they cross city boundaries, then they're able to get more collaboration from bigger buckets of money from the county or the state typically. And so that's helped a lot. So there's a lot of collaboration happening to make sure that there's continuing infrastructure. Bike lanes are continuing. They don't just stop at the city boundary. So lots of different buckets and trying to maneuver, obviously, in these changing times.
I mean, we're in South Florida, so how about anything regionally going on with any surtaxes or revenue initiatives at the MPO or other levels?
Broward County passed in 2018, implemented in 2019, the penny tax for transportation, and that's really for congestion management in then 3 ways: a third for transit as rail and bus, and then a third for signal prioritization, and then a third for local cities. And that can be multimodal improvements to get people, obviously, first, last mile improvements for walking, biking, and get them to the transit. So that's been moving through the county. We're 7-8 years in. So the process is a little slow in the beginning, right? Because you have to do the planning phase and the design has to be underway and then a lot of agreeing and then the electeds change. So it's moving a little slower than the public would like right now, but there is money there. I'm really excited. The county is moving toward electric buses. They're only investing in that. So that's been really exciting. They're really trying to get a rail connection between the airport and the seaport. We have a huge cruise in Port Everglades and Broward. And so really trying to harness the opportunities that we have first to get buy-in from the public so that we can amp it up and move forward.
Okay, that's great. And so those categories you mentioned are all sustainable sources, mobility, reduce congestion, helping with transit. Thank you for that. Now I want to ask you one of our final questions here about sustainability's cousin, resilience, since we are in a coastal community, coastal zone here. And I want to maybe start with you, Christine, on things you've seen that have impacted the public infrastructure, transportation systems from coastal storm damage or extreme weather, hurricane-related elements. Any experiences you've had that have affected the industry here or the infrastructure here in the last few years?
I don't want to jinx it. We haven't had a storm recently, so knock on wood that we don't have a storm this year. But I did join the city of Fort Lauderdale right after Hurricane Sandy, which washed away about a mile section of A1A. And so it was an opportunity.
Beachfront Avenue.
Yeah, Beachfront Avenue. That's right, Shane. That was an opportunity. So the road is a regional road, so they had to do some emergency funds, but it gave the community an opportunity to really have a discussion about what they wanted to put back. And we're able to leverage emergency funds to put back something that really served the community better than it did before. And so we were able to go in with partnership with the state and the MPO actually and put down a street, which is really great right now. So it's one lane each direction, wide sidewalks, parking, access to the beach, a really resilient seawall that was put in to be 30 feet deeper than below grade. And then they also put in natural dunes that were all washed out as part of the storm. So you've got 2 buffers to potential storm surge in the future. Other than that, the premise is really, we're at sea level here. And so it's really hard to do any storage underground. I mean, the water's right there. And so really trying to minimize the impervious surfaces has been part of the goal, and making sure we're using pavements that maybe are pervious so that when we do have storms that it's not inundating too much, using vegetation to suck up as much as we can. So trying to get as creative as possible to make sure we're getting the most, but then balancing the mobility, the resiliency, and all the needs, congestion management, all those transportation needs within that limited right of way. We're working on it. We're still looking for more technology, so let's go.
Good points. And we toured that 1A project earlier today, so check that out on another episode of the Public Works Podcast. But also, the stats are out that doing work to harden or make more resilient infrastructure to pre-mitigate saves you about $6 for every $1 you can spend to do that. So about a 6-to-1 ratio to get ahead of it and mitigate. It's at $6 to replace it, $1 to make it hardened. In coastal areas, that can go up to 13-to-1. So $13 to 1 to replace a major transportation facility, for example, instead of trying to do efforts ahead of time to harden or make it more resilient. So, Chris, you've lived here. What have you been experiencing or seen in your time?
Well, I've seen more than I wish I'd seen. I lived through a lot of hurricanes and impacts, and I've spent a lot of time helping agencies in their quest to work with FEMA, which can be quite challenging. And so I would say for what I talk about, resilience and pavement preservation go hand in hand. The first thing that FEMA will ask you when they show up after a storm, they're unavoidable for Florida, is what have you done to preserve your pavements? And if you don't have an answer for them, or even if you do have an answer and it doesn't meet their strict criteria, you will not have access to the Stafford Act public assistance. And the challenge is after a storm, how do we recover? How does the community come back from that? And you bring up a great example with A1A. Somebody has to rebuild those roads and somebody has to pay for that. And so normally there is assistance for communities impacted by storms, and that is this public assistance that I'm referring to. However, FEMA draws a line on what they consider deferred maintenance. And so if they find that you have not done any work to your pavements, any work to preserve your pavements or any other infrastructure, they will basically cross you off the list. But it's more problematic than that because, Shane, what they'll do is oftentimes you get approval, and so you go out and you might even spend the money, and then they will claw that back. I unfortunately have had to be involved in 2 Court of Appeals with FEMA where I served as the pavement expert. I'm 1-1 right now, but it's an ugly process. You do not want to get into that situation because it can be tens of millions of dollars that you're now not basically able to access to do your repairs. And the problem stems from oftentimes records keeping. Did the agency keep good records, and can they prove that what they did was what they said they did? Do they have the receipts, if you will? Even if you have the receipts, sometimes they're not adequate. And so the FEMA takes a pretty hardline stance, and you can get into a lot of trouble if you don't kind of dot the I's and cross the T's. My urging would be for any outside of Florida as well, as we saw with Helene and what North Carolina was impacted with, and certainly Texas and other disasters as well. You just have to be prepared ahead of time. Don't wait for the disaster. Understand that good stewardship involves maintaining assets, and to maintain assets, there's all the things that we always preach. And that really doesn't count if you didn't keep solid records of it. So you definitely need to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what's going to be required, especially if you're in these coastal communities. You need to know, and you need to drill that into all of the staff that this has to be kept and it needs to be there and available. And if elected officials, because oftentimes you get why are we doing something to a perfectly good road? And it's called preservation. It's like changing the oil in your car. Your car looks fine when you change the oil, right? But we still do it. And so the understanding needs to be, because if we don't, and there is, God forbid, a circumstance where there's a Category 5 storm, we will not have the ability to get public assistance. They will just either refuse it or accept it on face value and then deny you later, which is really even worse.
Yeah.
It's problematic, and it's something that I try to preach anytime I have a mic in front of me or I'm at technical sessions or anything else, because I've seen the impact it has on these communities. Oftentimes they take out a loan to go and do these repairs, and they're paying interest on it, and they think that FEMA is going to reimburse them, and then they have this loan that they can't cover potentially. So that money has to come from somewhere.
In addition to the time for
Yes.
reimbursements, which can be decades.
Yes, I just finished one that was from Hurricane Michael in 2018. So we
Okay.
just completed the appeals process, and it didn't go the way we wanted it to.
Asset management is a good principle regardless, to know how to maintain your infrastructure and figure out what the funding levels are to maintain it to a certain level. But this is an extra reason to do some asset management, to document your infrastructure. I think of bridges as being the things that are documented the most, right? Maybe inspection every 2 years or whatever, but every other asset doesn't necessarily have that cycle. Storm drain facilities, pavements. So good points there.
Yep.
All right. Thank you for your answers on resilience. Appreciate that. As we wrap up here today, you all have done a great job as I've hit you with questions you almost didn't know anything about before we started from a preparation standpoint, but you're good sports. You jumped in, you did it. You did a great job. Anything else you wanted to add before we close out today? And happy to give you the floor. And if not, at least let us know where we can find you, your teams, or things you're doing. Maybe Christine, we'll start with you on this. Final thoughts, and how can people get in touch with you?
Just excited about the future of creating safer streets in South Florida. We have the right environment because we are building out here. People are moving to Florida, which is great for business, right? And so really the opportunity to get creative and work with cities to create those more resilient, sustainable solutions so that we can have more livable communities. I'm just finished the Broward Safety Action Plan. That plan has a multitude of resources, including a new Safe Streets Design Manual.
Okay.
It can be found on our website, safestreets4broward.org. All the resources are there for any community to utilize to get safer streets.
That's great. And it's relatable to other communities, even though it was
Yes.
built for Broward. You could use it as a model or an example.
Of course.
right?
It's got how to basically go through the design process to integrate over 40 safety countermeasures into your roadway design based on their context and classification, basically. So any city could use it.
Okay, great. Appreciate that. Chris, what are your final thoughts? And how do
Wow,
we get a
final
hold of you?
thoughts. Yes, definitely. I think I take away from just being around this for so long is that we're getting to this point where transportation is a service. I came here in I guess what would be considered semi-autonomous vehicle. It could drive itself here. And I'm just amazed that we're here at this point. We're not totally here, but there's multiple. For instance, I've taken Waymos in Phoenix and California. And we're just at this crossroads where technology is colliding with our traditional infrastructure. Are we ready? I think we're attempting to be ready. There's definitely technology out there to help us be ready, but there's also things that we need to understand. As something as easy that we never really thought about was the line striping. Is it something that an autonomous vehicle can see? If it can't see your striping and you've let it wear out, is that going to be a problem? Is it going to swerve into other lanes? It can be a scary ride when the car does something you're not prepared for. And so the other thing that we preach is that these autonomous cars work much better with a pothole-free road. You don't want to be on a roller coaster. It's supposed to be a safe street for all, for the car as well. And so I think that the critical thing is that we have to maintain our infrastructure. We can't let it get dilapidated. We can't wait for things to happen. And so I encourage public works professionals to be creative, be aggressive, look at these technologies, and really don't be afraid of them. A lot of these preservation strategies have been around for 50, 60, 100 years, so they're not new. Whereas the vehicles that are driving on them are brand new and get more advanced by the day. We just have to be careful this collision of technology that's going to be occurring. If folks want to learn more about our technology, they can find us at pavetechinc.com or smallgeatingroads.com if you want to learn more about just that technology. And certainly I'm very active in LinkedIn, as you both are probably as well. Shane, I know you are on that. I see you a lot. I'm like, there he is.
We'll be out there promoting this
I know.
episode.
I can't wait. Exactly. That's a good way to start. And this next decade is going to hold so many amazing things. I think we finally have the ability maybe to get what we're after, which is towards zero deaths on our roadway system. There's always going to be something, but it doesn't have to be a situation where we lose 30,000 people a year to accidents on our roadway system. I think that's really exciting because every one of those lives is invaluable. It's priceless. And so protecting both our critical infrastructure and our human assets is really important. So I'm excited about the future.
Yeah, great. I know, Christine, you're working on Vision Zero stuff as well.
Yes.
So appreciate that. Yes, you can fully automate the vehicles, but they need a system that's safe and functional to drive on, and they need a pavement to actually have their
And some
wheels
lights
touching.
and some striping.
All good stuff. I really want to thank you, Christine and Chris, for being here today on the show in South Florida, in Delray Beach, actually. And I hope you enjoyed this layout in studio today. Thanks again to my guests. Go out and thank a public works professional for the work they're doing that you probably won't even see, but you're using every day. And with that, be sure to, again, go to the YouTube channel, subscribe to this, tell a friend, like the episodes. Follow us on LinkedIn, where we'll promote this and all the other episodes. And I've been your host today, Shane Silsby, for this special episode of the Public Works Podcast. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. All right. Here we are.
Joseph here, Public Works Podcast.
Shane here as well.
All right, so you just watched some cool content. All we need from you is to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It helps us get the message out. It helps us propagate the gospel of public works. So if you have free time, which you probably have 2 or 3 seconds, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so more people can follow us.
That's right. All we're trying to do is highlight the public works industry.
That's it.
Make those professionals trying to improve your communities look good and raise awareness and credibility of public works.
Yes.
It's easy to do.
Once again, thanks for watching. If you have any content ideas, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments, and Shane or I will answer them within a week of you putting it in there, and we'll get you the answer that you need.
Thank you very much.